Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Beyond Delivery. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We have a really good one for you guys today. I don't know how you guys feel about funeral home stories. I listen to a lot of scary stories and just stories in general, but my favorites are the funeral home stories. I always wondered if creepy things happened at funeral homes. Well, this particular story that we're going to listen to is a pretty good one. So you guys know what to do. Sit back, relax, grab a snack, and listen to some stories. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan. I'm 35 years old, and I grew up in Kentucky. Starting when I was about 5, my parents bought a funeral home. It was well over 100 years old when they bought it. They owned and ran the funeral home, and it's pretty large. We lived in the upstairs area of the funeral home. They still own and operate the funeral home to this day, and I visit pretty regularly and occasionally have experiences. I've had a very interesting childhood growing up. This is going to be a long read. As a child, I had many experiences every day all the way up until I moved out at 19. Some were terrifying and some were comforting. We had many resident spirits that just stayed around. Some were human, some definitely weren't human. Each had its own personality and temperament. I still have experiences to this day when I go to visit my parents. The first experience I remember when I was about 6 years old. I was sitting on the couch in one of the viewing rooms and I got the feeling of being watched. I looked up and saw a woman standing in the corner of the room. She was a young woman in her mid-20s. She was wearing a black dress. She was very pale and she had long red hair. She smiled and waved at me, then said, "Hello, little girl." I said, "Hello back." And she smiled again, then disappeared. She would become known as Alice. She, the most extroverted and nice of the resident spirits in the funeral home. She was very talkative. I formed a good relationship with her. She pretty much became like a second mother to me. She was the matriarch spirit of the funeral home. Here's a summary of my experiences with her. Number 1, I would see her almost every day, standing in the corner or in the middle of a room. Number 2, she was always smiling and she always said hello. When I would get off the bus from school, she would always be standing there when I would walk in the door to greet me. She would smile and say hello, then she would ask how my day was. I would say hello and tell her about my day. Then she would disappear. One time in high school, I snuck out to go to a party and she appeared to my mother in her bedroom and told on me. My mother was waiting up for me in the kitchen when I returned. She protected me from one of the darker, non-human spirits that hung out in the embalming room. The first time I wandered into the embalming room, right after we moved in, I saw a spirit that definitely didn't seem human. It looked like a young girl that was wearing a gray t-shirt and black pants. Its skin was like scales. It was very reptilian looking. It had a forked tongue like a snake and red eyes. The first time I saw it, I had wandered into the embalming room for the first time. I was just exploring right after they moved in. I heard a loud growl and looked up, and it was just standing there staring at me. I was paralyzed with fear. Then Alice appeared. It looked at her and kind of leaned its head to the side like a dog that's curious about something. She told it to leave me alone, and it growled, took a step towards me. Alice then stepped in front of me, and this reptilian thing looked exactly terrified, just completely terrified. Then Alice stuck her arm out, and this thing started to levitate, and it was choking. It looked like the Darth Vader choke. Alice then moved her arm to the side, and it flew into the wall and disappeared. After that, Alice turned around and got on her knees in front of me and told me to be more careful, and then disappeared. I don't know if Alice is human, but I'm not sure, you guys. Tell me what you think. She is seemingly very powerful. Now, to give a summary of my experiences with the reptilian spirit. The experience with Alice protecting me. One time I saw it in one of the hallways and it climbed up the wall onto the ceiling and just stared at me, growled, and then disappeared. I saw it every time I walked in or past the embalming room. It would just stand there and stare. It never tried to attack me. I think it's because Alice scared it to death. Now, to talk about the spirit that we called the Gray Man, we would see him in the chapel. He was tall and was wearing a gray suit and black tie. Most of the time, he just stood there sometimes and he would wave. He was an older man. He never really bothered anybody. He typically just kept to himself. He was quite protective over the organ and the chapel. Maybe that's what he was attached to. There was the spirit of a little girl that hung out in the living room. She wore a pink dress and had long blonde hair. Most of the time, you would hear laughing, then she would appear in front of you, then run away and disappear. Then there was the spirit we called the General. He was a young man that wore what looked like a military dress uniform from possibly the Civil War. He never really said anything to us, but he was always polite and would tip his hat when we would see him. There was an elderly couple that would sometimes see standing side by side. They were dressed in Victorian style clothing. That's just some of the experience that my family and I have had. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Feel free to message me. And there you go, guys. Another episode of Beyond Delivery. I think that story was pretty good because I think I'm going to eventually read more because I really, really like these stories. I like hearing about like creepy things that may or may not happen inside funeral homes. And I do just want to give a disclaimer, guys. I'm surprised I actually got through the story because I've recently just got over the flu, and the cough and everything is still kind of lingering. So please forgive the voice, guys. I'm surprised I made it through the whole recording. Just get my voice back. So I appreciate you guys for checking in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. So remember again, if you want your stories read on Beyond Delivery, then send your stories over to beyonddelivery3@gmail.com.